So this video, guys, is just a little bit of a mash about 4 bikes I rode within the last few weeks since the beginning of 2024. We're into February now, and one of the reasons is because I developed a fault with this 1250 GS, 3 years old. On the TE I had a little emissions icon come up, so I rang BMW Motorbikes up. They said bring it in if we have the parts, which was pointing to the manifold. It seems to be a bit of a common fault with the older GS models. Okay, this is only 3 years old. And true enough, yeah, it was the butterfly valve in the manifold in the exhaust. It gets a bit corroded from the carbon, or just gets a bit stuck. So they replace it with a ceramic butterfly valve. They take the old manifold off and they get a nice new shiny chrome exhaust. They didn't have one in stock, so they said we're going to give you an F900R just for a couple of days. So I took that out. It's super naked, really lovely bike, and I kind of fell in love with it. If I ever bought or considered buying a naked bike, that is a bike I would seriously consider. Loads of fun you can have on that bike. That was the second bike. Obviously I'm taking the GS 1250 is one of the bikes that I rode, so that's 2 bikes. And I also took out the GS 1300, the new one. So when I took this in, I did ask if I could take the new 1300 out, and because it's sort of a popular bike to be taken out on test rides, I said I could have it for an hour, so I thought there's no point doing any recording. I thought I'd just use it as a first feeler, but he actually said I could have it for a couple of hours, so did do a little bit of recording. So see what my thoughts are on the new 1300 in comparison to the old 1250. Not a review, just a little bit of a short feedback on my first impressions on the bike. And then the fourth bike, the BMW S1000 XR, took that out about just over 3 weeks ago on a test ride, and it wasn't a very nice day. The roads are filthy. I didn't get a lot of good camera footage, so I never posted a video, but got a few little bits on the bike and my opinion on it. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. So it's great to be back in the saddle, and what I thought I'd do is just go out and make sure the bike's all okay, everything's working right. I mean, I'm sure it was always going to be. Check the oil, check the tyres, all that kind of stuff. And I thought I'd just go to a motorcycle shop called Simply Motorcycles in Hinckley in Leicestershire, and it's one of the best motorcycle shops in my area, if you like, in terms of the variety of bikes, second-hand bikes. There is actually a Suzuki motorcycle dealer in this factory. And the other thing I was considering, you guys know I've got the JSX 1400, the first edition, and I was pondering with the idea of selling it or trading it in and getting something different. Yeah, I guess there's not many people here, but we'll have a look round anyway. Oh, it's a bit parky, it's about 6 degrees, but let's get in there, have a look round, see if there's any bikes that take my fancy. But just come have a look at all these bikes, it's fantastic. In the red corner, after admiring some of the beautiful Ducati bikes such as the Panigale V2955 and the Panigale 1199S, I had to stop daydreaming and look at something sensible to trade in for my Gixxer 1400, such as perhaps a Triumph Trident or the new impressive looking 2023 Triumph Street Triple 765 RS. But then one particular bike caught my eye. This beast, a Ducati Monster 1200R. Now, reading the Motorcycle News reviewer of the report said about the Monster 1200, quote, "Getting on a Monster 1200 and opening the throttle for 1.5 seconds is like having your brain smashed out by a large gold brick. It is stupidly, ridiculously, brutally fast at 143 brake horsepower." So you can see on the TFT there, have it checked by a specialist workshop. So coming up, the 4 bikes I road tested over the course of 4 weeks, and I'll also throw into the mix which one would you prefer to have or ride or buy even. I'll tell you at the end of the video which one I actually preferred. Now the first one is the BMW R1300 GS, which has been flogged to death on social media and on YouTube of late since its release. So I won't go into too much detail. You can actually find a link to a 12-minute video of my first impressions of the bike, a road test ride. It's the end of this video. Click on the link. What I will initially say just briefly about these 4 bikes, and the first one, the 1300, is that BMW set out with a clean slate with the GS, because it's been developed over 40 years, and you could say it's got bigger and bigger and heavier. So they set out with the intentions of having maximal reduction instead of ever increasing size, which BMW said would also result in inimitable handling. Easy for me to say. I checked out the meaning of inimitable, and that says in the dictionary, so good or unusual as to be impossible to copy. Now I thought that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because if you remember, Ducati brought out the radar pack, which was a game changer really in terms of rider safety, because it's got the blind spot detector in the wing mirrors, and it's also got breakage on the bike, which if the bike detects an imminent danger in terms of impact, it will actually put breakage on the bike even before you do. So that's fantastic in terms of rider safety. Now the other thing is the Harley Davidson implemented the adaptive ride technology, whereby the bike will reduce its suspension when it comes to a halt, and when you pull off it will rise up another 30 millimeters. So that's great for sort of shorter riders that are trying to get their feet planted on the ground. But both those technologies from Harley Davidson and Ducati have been implemented onto the new GS 1300. The GS is a fantastic bike. I was really impressed with it. The 1300 has a newly developed chassis, a new monocoque rear frame, a new Evo telelever and power lever, as well as the new dynamic suspension adjustment. It has a completely redesigned engine, providing an extra 9 brake horsepower, and it's lighter by 12 kilograms. Now I did feel like I was riding a 900 as opposed to a 1300, as the bike has slimmed down, which is reflective in its looks, and which some people have said they still prefer the look of the older GS 1250. I tend to agree. I was impressed with the new 1300 suspension, road handling, improved gear shifter, all the new tech, and the electric windscreen is pretty neat. Starting out at $15,995 for the base model. If you're adding a lot of packs and other features, then you could be expected to pay anything up to the region of £23,000. I do have a few niggles with the bike, which, as I've said, you can see on the link at the end of this video. Time will tell if the new 1300 keeps out in front. So the second bike is the R1250 GS, and this bike is the TE variant, which I've had for about 3 years. I've done about 20,000 miles, mainly around England and Wales. I'm yet to do Ireland and Scotland, but I've also hired the HP version of the 1250 GS in Greece. I've ridden around the island there and up the mountain. And what I will say, I've also ridden it in Spain on an off-road. It was my first introduction to off-road on a big 1250 adventure. One resounding memory I do have of this, how good this bike is when we were put into enduro mode and we went off-road. I couldn't believe how well it performed and how reliable it was and how stable, because of its low down torque and it's just its handling. The fascinating thing was we then put it into dynamic mode. Went onto the roads, the Spanish roads through the mountains, and fantastic roads there in Spain, and it just performed like a sports bike. Not quite like a sports bike, but here's an example. There was a guy, there was 4 of us, the instructor, me and a father and son, and the son, he had a Fireblade, and he was riding the GS, a HP variant, around the Spanish mountains, and he was leaning over so much he was catching the peg on the road, and he said he had to remind himself. He says, hold on a minute, I'm on a GS, I'm not on a Fireblade. But that just shows you how good this bike is on the road, having some fun on the twisters as well. But anyway, let's get into some of the stats of the GS 1250. The 1250 is £1,000 cheaper than the new 1300, as the 1300 has had a complete new overhaul. The 1250 power unit is a 4-stroke flat twin boxer engine. Torque is 143 Newton meters, that's 6,250 revs per minute, and a top speed of 200 kilometers an hour. A wet weight of 249 kilograms and a 20 litre fuel tank. BMW stated fuel range of 4.75 litres per 100 kilometers. The 1250's dependable handling results from the telelever monoshock front suspension and rear single power lever swing arm. I obviously have more experience on the 1250 GS, but will it be my bike of choice over these 4 bikes? To keep this video in a bite-sized chunk, click on this thumbnail here to see the next 2 bikes of the 4 and see which one I pick and whether I trade my Gixxer 1400 in for another bike. Click this thumbnail here.